Thanks for joining us today. I'm Jonathan from Your Why, and I'm truly honored and grateful to have this opportunity to bring you these conversations with leaders in their field related to living mindfully. As your moderator, I come to you with 30 plus years of experience in mindfulness, wellness, and mental health. I will offer you that to be mindful is to be aware and alive in this present moment. I was in a meditation this morning. I pulled it up on YouTube. It was Deepak Chopra. And I really appreciated something that he said related to being mindful. He talked about it as bringing our attention to the present and being aware, bringing our awareness to this moment, and then being aware of our awareness, witnessing it, watching it. And as you do that, you come into a level of consciousness, a consciousness that is not in time and space, but one of being. So I offer you that today. Our guest is Selena Villegas. Selena, welcome.
Hi, Jonathan.
Our topic is Rise San Diego, and the hope is in the course of our conversation that we all get to know the important work that Rise is doing in the community. If I can offer you, the theme is really to get to know, we recognize what change needs to happen in our communities. Often we struggle with addressing it, and even when we do address it, we struggle with how to fulfill that change. Often it means difficult, deep work that needs to be done. So in the course of our conversation, we'll get to explore that a little bit. But before we do, I want to offer you a little bit of the background of our guest. Selena is a Hood Scholar raised in City Heights, the neighborhood of San Diego. For the last 12 years, she has advocated for Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities, serving nonprofit, corporate, educational sectors in their efforts to provide professional development, educational equity, cultural change. Currently, she serves as the leadership program manager of RISE, where they foster urban leadership and engagement with everyday people at a grassroots level. Selena is very impressive in terms of her background. She's inducted into the San Diego Unified School District Hall of Fame, recognized by our Senate leader, Tony Atkins, as an emerging female leader. She is RISE Urban Leadership Fellow in 2017. She's a Lida Ramos Fellow in 2019. She earned 2 Bachelor of Arts in Rhetoric Studies, American Studies from the UC Berkeley, a Master's in Leadership Studies from the University of San Diego. So offering us a wealth of background. So as we start off, I was reading that one of the mottos with RISE is the saying, neighborhoods first, they say. Neighborhoods first, they say. What does that mean, Selena?
Yes, well, it's important, I think, for me to note that RISE San Diego was founded in 2014, and it was during a time that Ferguson was in an unrest because there was a lot of protests and riots that were happening the days following the fatal shooting of Michael Brown, and so what came a lot from those protests from cities away in San Diego was we had 2 folks who were running for city council against one another in Southeast San Diego. So Tony Young and Dwayne Crenshaw, while Ferguson was going on, was realizing that instead of fighting against one another, let's kind of put our talents alongside each other. And what they both came to realize that we wanted to change the face of leadership in San Diego. A lot of times, folks who are in charge of our communities or our neighborhoods, whether it be the school board or city council or even a mayor, we assume what the community needs, or we only hear about 4 or 5 voices from the community. So when we say, or we hear people say, we care about the community, we care about the neighborhood, we want to make sure that that's an all-inclusive statement that we're including our neighbors, we're including our grandparents, we're including the folks that don't really have access to attend some of these city council meetings, or really have a voice loud enough for folks to hear. And so the idea was to elevate and advance those voices that already and have existed in San Diego, especially urban San Diego. And so that's what we mean by neighborhood first.
So it's really bringing everyone together and bringing everyone along and empowering them and moving them forward.
Yes, and making sure that anything that we a decision that we make for the community is coming from the community.
Excellent. I was reading about the civic engagement. There's a number of things that Rise San Diego does civically. If you can just highlight some of that for us.
Yeah, so we've been around since 2014. So in the last 5 to 6 years, we've been able to provide a lot of training and technical assistance to a lot of to small business owners and nonprofits and in the mid-city area and southeastern San Diego areas. We do this through our project Most, and that can be found on our website. But a lot of participants in this program, they gain skills and knowing how to plan and resource development, succession planning, and other areas like that for organizational success. We also work in partnership with the University of San Diego to host a fellowship program. So every year we pick about 25 individuals within the county of San Diego. So that's as north as Oceanside and as south as right onto the border, of just looking to identify folks and empower the next generation of leaders who will also working for folks to bring up the communities. And then we offer free civic engagement trainings alongside with our community partners. And our goal there is to promote folks who are a part of community planning groups and who are looking to effectively engage with our elected officials and other decision makers in San Diego that are looking to grow and succeed.
You were a fellow in 2017. Was that how you got engaged with Rise San Diego?
Yes, I started following them on Twitter in 2015. I heard a lot about the urban breakfast clubs that they were having. So once a month, they would host a topic. They would charge $25 a seat for you to come have some breakfast and hear about what's going on in the communities. And I got to attend one of the breakfasts and was really, really intrigued and really just fell in love with the energy really in the space. I applied for the fellowship and I was one of 24 fellows. And so that's really how I got involved. And then they hired me because they loved me so much.
Ah, that's a great story. Now I know Rise is involved with a number of nonprofit partnerships as well in the community.
Yes, we have a lot of nonprofit partnerships. We work with pretty much anyone and everyone that is looking for our services. I know recently, due to the global health crisis that we're in, we've had to take the concept of the Rise Urban Breakfast Club online. And so now we have a Rise Now webinar series. And so we partner with a lot of folks in the community that are coming from nonprofit spaces to talk about and reference all the things that are trending right now. And so we've hosted a couple of topics on like what the impact of COVID is having on education, or what the impact of COVID is having on students. And we've talked about like Black women in the movement. We've talked about the difference between allyship and accomplice and advocacy, and making sure that the folks that we have on those webinars are representative of the nonprofit partnerships that we have.
It sounds like obviously what you're speaking to in those gatherings are relevant to our times. I know there's been a lot of discussion here at the Y related to schools needing to do distant learning for the time being and what role that we can play. We're running camps right now, and That was the first time for many of our campers that they were away from home due to COVID and the self-quarantine.
Yes.
And so what that looks like in going forward, if children are needing to go back to be home, in home distant learning, and how do they get socialization? How do they get support tutoring? Only so much can be done through Zoom. And so there's some
Yes.
particular challenges there. And so we're looking at how we can address some of that. Now I know Selena, your focus is leadership development. Share a little bit about what you're involved in there.
Yes. So I mentioned earlier that we work in partnership with the University of San Diego. So their Leadership Institute is really what we try to teach onto our fellows that are coming in every year. And so what we notice is, in terms of leadership development, is that leadership is interpreted in so many ways and experienced in so many ways. And so there's often a confusion between leadership and authority, or leadership and management. And so I think at the basic level, we try to have folks recognize that there is a difference between somebody just telling you what to do and somebody leading you what to do. And then taking that a step further is making sure that as leaders, we're not just telling somebody what to do, but we're also leading somebody into that role. And so what we realized, and I mean, I say realize, but I think it's an ongoing conversation, is that leadership is really hard, and because change is really hard. And so oftentimes we have one foot on the gas and we have another foot on the brake. And so we have this almost genuine intention, and an authentic want and need to change, so that foot on that gas. And then we have this other part that's like, well, I have these and these other I have I might have school going on, or there's other things going on with equal amount of energy. And so it's often like, how do I navigate that? How do I change that? And for different folks, it looks differently. Some folks want to run for city council, and others just want to create nonprofits. Others just want to create change in their own homes. And so that journey looks different for everyone, but it's helpful to kind of know what those barriers are for everyone.
I know when you and I had the opportunity to talk a little bit prior to this conversation, and we were talking about neighborhoods first and really wanting to have sustaining resolution to problems in our communities. And you used the example of crime.
Yes.
And you talked about the technical solutions versus what you would call adaptive solutions.
Yes.
If you were to articulate a model, how you go about bringing through change in the community, what would that be?
Yes. What we're finding is that the single biggest failure of leadership is that we treat adaptive challenges like technical problems. And so if I can just share very briefly, that the technical problems are the problems that are almost easy to fix, or they can be solved by an authority or an expert, or by a tested procedure. A lot of norms and a lot of systems exist in that. And so a lot of the times, we come into the community and we say, we want to stop crime. And so that's such a large statement. And we can even go to our city council members and say, we want to stop crime. We want to stop crime. This is happening. And so the technical solution might be that we put street lights in the neighborhood. And that's operating off of the assumption that that's really the root issue of crime, that not having a street light was the reason why crime existed. So an adaptive issue is a lot more challenging. It is asking us to address the changes in our priorities, our beliefs, our habits, our loyalties, and it really doesn't have a known, the solution isn't there just in front of our faces. It's going to involve a lot of curiosity. I think this is where the mindfulness comes in, a lot of awareness, a lot of unlearning of what is going on in the community to really find out, really taking that longer route to figure out, how do I solve crime? What is the reason of crime?
Well, to your point, the street lighting could make a difference, but that's at a certain level. That's a superficial
Yes.
problem, they say, but it could offer some relief and some support to combat crime. But you're talking about really getting down to the core of why is there crime going on in a particular community, and how does that get addressed from the community? And I think you shared the model of adaptive leadership came from a Ronald Heifetz. Uh,
Yes.
what is adaptive leadership?
Yes. So adaptive leadership comes from Ronald Heifetz. We learned about it through a leadership uh, a leadership training that they had at the Harvard. I believe it was the Kennedy School. And so it's a type of leadership. Adaptive leadership is, recognizing that solutions are not easy to identify. It requires a change in values and beliefs. It requires a lot of changes across a lot of boundaries. So it could be changes of self, it could be changes of your friends, changes of neighborhoods, changes of folks who are sitting at tables making really, really large choices for folks. But the idea is that there is no quick fix here. And so it's going to require constant mindfulness, constant experimentation of figuring out how do we get into the root. And so one of the things that is required of adaptive leadership is this thing that you and I spoke to about immunity to change. And that's taking an x-ray of the problem or the x-ray of ourselves to figure out what is it, that thing that we're avoiding that we don't want to talk about. And Jonathan, you and I spoke to this idea of, if you're going to the doctor and let's just say like smoking is one of those things, like you're telling your lungs look really bad. And you're like, okay, well, I know. Well, okay, you got to stop smoking. Okay, well, so some of the times we know what the answer is, but it's that 1 foot on the gas pedal, 1 foot on the brake, is that we have this commitment to want to change. And we say that we do, but then we have this other commitment where it's like, well, I feel really comfortable here, or this is where I've lived for a really long time. And so when we apply that kind of thinking into systems and into neighborhoods, we find that a lot of those things are very similar. That I think that a lot of us really, really know maybe what it takes to stop crime, but it's just so hard to even want to go there, because it would mean that you'd have to address all these other things that haven't been addressed for a really long time.
But I love your example, because in our lives, you want to lose weight. So yeah, okay, I need to eat better. I should change my diet. You use the example of smoking, but to actually get to more of a systemic change, there is deep work that needs to be done. And when you're talking about that in a community, you're really needing a consensus, a coalition of,
Yes.
of what is the problem, how do we really make this change. And it's something that I also believe that once you achieve that, it's more sustaining, because you've done the work to bring that change about. So how do you change that mindset of, yeah, sure, I should stop smoking, but
yeah, so we have a couple of workshops that we go through. And so I think like the simple way that I can share is that we have folks do an x-ray of themselves and then do an x-ray of the community. And we also want to make sure that when folks are making an x-ray of the community, that they're not operating off of any assumptions off the community. And so again, we have folks do an x-ray of themselves and then of the community. And so step one of giving yourself an x-ray in terms of, what is this immunity that I need to change about my system thinking or my habits is to define, and you have to take one at a time. You can't solve, we can't solve everything all at once. So the first step is to take one thing from the list of goals that you have about yourself, and then write down kind of what are some behavioral things that you think and you know that you need to do to improve those goals. And then the second step would be, okay, what are the behaviors that you're doing now that are working against those goals that you know that you have? Okay, so let's start to uncover what are you doing or what are you not doing to make these goals happen. And so step two is kind of really the hardest part, is because you have to own that. You have to own that part of yourself that's like, well, you know, I say that I want to be healthy, but I'm, you know, I really like gummy bears a lot. And that's what I eat for breakfast and for dinner. And, you know, and so that's just a really simple example.
What a good.
And so, and so step number three would be, you know, what are the commitments that you have in that doing or not doing against your goals? And so it's taking that doing and not doing a step further. Like, what are you afraid to let go of? And then taking that a step further, where does that come from? Where did you first learn that? Or are you using that as, you know, is it a trauma response? Is it a coping mechanism that has been helpful for you to help you stay safe, to help you feel loved, to help you? And so we touch on a lot of those heavy topics. You know, we take something as simple as, you know, I want to be healthy, or as simple as, you know, I want to stop crime. And then we have to take it there. We have to take it into that conversation of, okay, well, why is it working the way that it's working now? Why are we, or why are they so, why are we comfortable there? What are we benefiting from not having changed? And then once we figure that out, we can do a lot of unlearning in that process.
Well, I like that you start with this intrapersonal dynamic where you reveal and understand your own dynamic, and then it sounds like you then pitch it into the society or the community.
Yes.
And I could see that this would be a pretty time-intensive process. There would be the need to be patient with it,
Yes.
to bring all the influencers, change agents together. And so not an easy process, I would think, to bring
No.
up that change in mindset as a community.
Right. It's not easy. And the fellowship program we have is a year long, and we have 4 3-day forums, and each forum is about 8 hours long. And so what we have seen over the years is that we're dealing with some pretty heavy stuff. When we're talking about urban leadership, we're talking about folks that are coming from urban communities, and lots of times we see that there is, you know, the trauma exists already, either in their bodies, or it has existed in their families, or it's ancestral. And so those are, so bringing those things to light are very, it's a vulnerable time. And so it does require a lot of time, a lot of space, and a lot of grace in the process. And I think that we at Rise San Diego, we really hold space for folks, and we you know, let them know that you're not alone, that we know, and I know, and we're going through this as a family, as a community. And once we can figure those things out for ourselves, it is helpful to walk into a community and not want to assume anything about it, and being very curious about what is going on, where is that coming from, you know, why what is going on has been working, but also, like, you know, needs to change, needs to pivot, what some of those barriers are going to be, the pushback. And so by experiencing it yourself, you can, it's helpful for you before you go into community. You want to change everything about it.
I can see how, as you become more aware yourself, because you mentioned kind of the ancestral or the generational patterns, how things have just been this way. It's always been this way in our community, and our family has participated in this way. And as you alluded to, the whole idea of unlearning some of those patterns so that we're not just unconsciously propagating that.
Right, right.
So tell me maybe a success that you've been able to see come about through the community work, the urban leadership that you've been involved in.
Yeah. So each fellowship year, each fellow has a project. So we make sure that you're working on that internal work because that's important. But you're also working on something called a community action project. And so each fellow kind of has their own thing going on. And so what we've seen over the years is that some people, their projects are to run for office. And so we have somebody in office right now for District 4, who was a fellow in my year in 2017, and realized that, a lot of the change that she wants to do just has to be done at that level. And so she led a grassroots campaign in Southeast San Diego. A lot of folks didn't think that she was going to win because an incumbent had been in the seat already, I think, like for 10 years. And so there was no way that, somebody new was going to come in. And lo and behold, she won fair and square. And so I would label that as a success for a fellow who said, this is based off of the interpersonal work and intrapersonal work that I'm doing. This is where I want to be, and have that be successful for her. There are some other cases where we also have a partnership with some folks in the sheriff's department or the police department. And so we've had some folks say, hey, I come from Southeast San Diego, and I'm a police officer. So I'm dealing with some of those, the complexities that come with that. I'm from the neighborhood, and I'm also can recognize that the neighborhood has this a distrust with the police. And so we have had a fellow create an art project at the police department, allowing youth to, I think they had like a blank wall, and allowing the youth to come and use their spray paint or whatever it was that they were using on the streets at the police department. And so that would be kind of another example of a successful community action project. And then most recently, we just lost a major member in the community. His community action project was to create a nonprofit law firm. And so he was offering a sliding scale, fee for folks who are needing help in family law, immigration law, which are both kind of really heavy right now in Southeast San Diego. And so he just had a sudden death with an accident. And so we're really sad to have to see him go, but he left a legacy here for us, which is that nonprofit law firm.
Wow. Well, I'm sorry for that loss for the community, and but I appreciate what you said. There's a legacy that he has offered, and is really empowering others to further at this time. So
yes.
Anything just in closing that you'd like to share with us? I really appreciate the important work that you're doing, but in closing, anything else that we should know?
Yeah, I mean, so every week we have a webinar series Rise San Diego has. So you're more than welcome to follow us on Facebook and/or on Instagram. Look for Rise San Diego. We also have an awards luncheon that's happening October 12th. And so we'll be asking for members of the community throughout San Diego for you to think about some leaders that you kind of want to shed a light on that you think deserve that recognition during this time.
That's great. So, Selena, a pleasure to sit with you and have this conversation. I admire the work that you're doing and continue to do. So thank you very much. And thank you for being with us today.
Yeah, it was really fun. Thank you.
And to all you, thank you. Until we see you again next week or later this week, we have another webinar. Hopefully everyone be well until then. Thank you very much.